want to greet you and welcome you back to HSTV's incisive interviews for this year 2024. We're going to continue to put our political leaders on the hot seat. We're going to continue to look at the issues that matter to you. Now, we ask on this, the situation right now, the questions that matter. The so what of our politics, our economy, and how our society is living. Now, I am your host as usual, Dhara B, and this is the situation right now on Heart and Soul TV and radio. Just join me after this break for this amazing interview. Just a week ago, Justice Luke Malaba officially opened the judicial year. And in his speech, he spoke about how the courts are responsible for entrenching constitutionalism and ensuring that everybody is treated equally before the law. But this statement has been contested. Some say that the judiciary has been captured, its independence lost, especially under the watch of Chief Justice Luke Malaba. Political prisoners have become the order of the day. And we're going to have a conversation around those issues and the political, social dynamics in Zimbabwe as we get into 2024. And joining me in studio to have that discussion is none other than one person who himself has been a political prisoner, locked up, kept in prison, convicted, and finally acquitted after serving almost a year in prison. Welcome to this show, President of Transform Zimbabwe, Jacob Ngarivhume.
Thank you, my brother. Compliments of the new year, and to all Zimbabweans. It's my pleasure to be with you here.
Amazing. You still look amazing, even after all this, these months in prison. How did you manage to keep yourself in shape?
Yeah, I think, what normally happens when you get into such a situation that I was in is initially you deny it, you try to find yourself out, and then upon realizing that you can't, you have to wait for processes that are not necessarily in your control, then you accept the situation, you do what you can do. I took my time to read. I probably read nearly 100 books for the 8 months or so I was in prison. And then, of course, I would find a lot of time to reflect, a lot of time also to pray. And so that really kept me going.
You walked into court a free man. Mm-hmm. And you're confident that we spoke, you were confident that you'll almost be acquitted. Mm-hmm. What went through your mind when you were declared guilty and were given that sentence? It was 4 years.
Yes. Initially, I was getting threatening messages, and despite the fact that I committed no crime, I was getting a lot of threatening messages. George Charamba was also helping that, by posting on his Twitter accounts, Twitter then, that I would go to prison. And then it became clear to me that the fact that I would go to prison had nothing to do with actually the facts presented in that court. And the magistrate who tried me, one Feresi or Ferosu Chakanyuka, she was so determined, and by the time the case was coming to a close, the trial that is, she was exhibiting a lot of anger and bitterness. She was very emotional. She had now taken everything personal. I think she had gotten the instruction that I must be convicted. And I could read from her expression. I could read from her rantings. It was not what you see in courts normally, to see an emotional magistrate like she was. And she was sending the message that she was ready. And in as much as I almost knew that the guilt would come, but what was more shocking to me was the 4 years for inciting public violence. The state could not prove a case against me completely. You read the judgment, the conviction at the magistrate's court, there was no case. there was no evidence presented. There was nothing. In fact, she resorted to Section 257, which would say, because I failed to present a defense outline to the police during the warned and cautioned statement, then I was guilty. That's what basically she said. And then she says nobody needs to present any evidence that I was guilty of the crime they were charging me, which was bizarre. And it was unbelievable. And you would wonder, did this lady ever read law? She probably did. But of course, she's working under circumstances that make it impossible to apply her mind to the facts. But the 4 years actually shocked me more than the conviction then.
But you talk about this presidential spokesperson, George Chanamba, tweeting that you will be convicted and all. And then on the opening of the judicial year, the Chief Justice Luke Malaba says that the law must treat everyone equally. Lady Justice is blind. Do you see Lady Justice as blind?
No, that is not true. I think, if anything, I honestly hope that at times Malaba would sit back at his office at the Supreme Court, at the JSC, or wherever, even at his home. He should reflect and say, where did I take the judiciary from the time he took over from Chijausigu to now? I think there has been a remarkable deterioration in terms of judicial capture and also fairness. I mean, I was in prison, you actually realize that the prisons are full of, number one, the poor, people who can't defend themselves, who commit crimes but then go as self-actors, or who don't even commit the crimes, but then they're unfortunate. And then because they can't defend themselves, they're in prison. Then the number two category of people you find in our prisons are political prisoners. People who have committed no crime like me, that at the end, after 8 months of serving in prison, then they say, you committed no crime, go home. And this is under the watch of Luke Malaba. He knows better that our magistrates have become kangaroo courts. There is no, when it comes to political cases, you clearly could see that what is happening here has nothing to do with the law. And this is happening under the watch of Luke Malaba. He knew that Chakanyuka was going to convict me. He probably had communicated with her, or whoever gives the orders, they had done so even through him. He knows, and he can't lie to this nation that justice in this country is blind. That is not true.
Are you angry?
I'm not angry. I'm not angry, but I think what I have learned over the years of fighting injustice in this country, I've learned and come to appreciate that we need to step up our effort if we are to confront these issues. I don't see Malaba willingly. I mean, remember, he's at the Supreme Court, his Chief Justice, is the Chief Justice. He's occupying that position, remember, illegally. His term expired. It was unconstitutional. A judgment from the High Court confirmed that it was unconstitutional. But then they went on to manipulate it. They broke the law for him to be there. So there's no way we would expect justice to flow out of a man himself who broke the same pillars of justice to be where he is. So I think I am very sure, and I'm even invigorated to understand that we need to do more if we are to change the situation in this country.
But if there's no justice, why are you out now? Because, I mean, he's the Chief Justice. He could have also instructed the High Court to keep you convicted, confirm the conviction, and maybe the Supreme Court as well. I mean, isn't that a contradiction in itself? That you finally got justice means there is justice.
But it's also a contradiction that I'm convicted at their court. Remember, the magistrate's court is the same court, and then at the High Court they say there's no crime committed. But I mean, look here. It looks as if for them, their purpose was to keep me in prison during the elections, which they did. So probably they'd attained their objectives, and so they'd no use to keep me inside, and then they let me out. Just the same way maybe with my friend and colleague Job Sikala, when they feel their objectives are met, then they release you. if you look at my conviction, I mean, like, I was actually charged on a separate Twitter account, which I never owned. They charged me under a Twitter account called Ngarivhume, which I never owned. And nobody in the family ever owned that. And then they convicted me. In the conviction, they convicted me under a Twitter handle called @Ngarivhume, which again I never owned. You know, and it's so bizarre.
But you do own a Twitter account.
I do own Ngarivhume Jacob. I do own a Twitter account. I've always owned a Twitter account, which we presented in the courts that I ran. I didn't deny the fact that I called for anti-corruption demonstrations. I did in 2020. And it's my constitutional right. I didn't deny the fact that I owned a Twitter account. I actually told them that my Twitter account is @Ngarivhume Jacob, which I still have, you know. And we asked them to verify with Twitter, and they could have done that. They could have verified with Twitter, but they never did that. And they were asked by my defense team to say, do you know the procedure that law enforcement agents need to take if they're to verify a Twitter account? They said, yes. What is it? Then this police officer goes through the procedure. He knows it. Did you do it on Jacob Ngarivhume? No, we never verified. And then how do you link him to these different Twitter accounts you are profiling? They couldn't answer. They said no. But the magistrate she turns a blind eye on all that. You know, she says, okay, I will still convict you anyway.
In your view, who's responsible for this shambolic justice system that you are talking about, and that there are so many political prisoners in prison?
The president, ED himself, Emmerson Mnangagwa, is responsible. Remember how proper nations are run is that you want to have separation of power in a proper democracy, whereby you have the executive, which is running the nation, and then independent and separated from the legislature, independent and separated from the judiciary. And the judiciary is one of the key pillars of those three establishments. Because, I mean, if I'm a businessman, I come to invest in Zimbabwe. The day I have a problem with the powerful forces of the executive, then I want my fallback would be an independent judiciary. Then they would serve me, because if I have committed no crime, then I'm protected and my investment is protected. But now with what is happening is you have the executive capturing the judiciary, like what ED has done. The judiciary is captured. I mean, they can talk whatever they want, but every Zimbabwean knows that our judiciary is captured, which is very unfortunate. And also look at what he's doing now. He's going beyond what even Mugabe did. Now, when he doesn't have 2/3 majority in the legislature, what does he do? He raises an imposter who recalls people and takes over. So he wants to be in charge of the judiciary, he's in charge of the legislature, and he's in charge of the executive. What kind of country is that? And he's purely responsible. A compromised judiciary that we have to the proportions, sickening proportions that we have now, is squarely on the lap and foot of the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, who is ED himself.
There's been other schools of thought that Nelson Chamisa is at fault, and he's also eliminating his political opponents through these arrests and detentions. What is your view on that?
I don't know that, and I wouldn't want to believe so. I mean, Nelson Chamisa leads the country's main opposition, and his party has also been at loss in terms of they've been at the receiving end of all these shenanigans. But of course, they have also made their own mistakes. I mean, which we can't deny. We can't even overprotect them on the mistakes they've made. He has made his own fair share of mistakes. But I think like any political leader, like any politician, you make your own mistakes. But those mistakes are not overall responsible for the mayhem that ED has created in this country. I don't think so.
Some say that, you know, Job Sikala is not happy that his comrades in the CCC have not assisted him in terms of him getting out of prison. What is your view, and do you maybe first of all, what is his view, because you spent some time with him in prison?
We discussed a lot. I mean, I talked a lot privately, personally, brotherly, and I think those discussions would be locker room talk that we had, and I would even prefer that he would speak for himself on these issues before I probably misrepresent his views on the issues themselves. Yeah, because remember, I don't come from Triple C. So I think he would be the best to answer for himself some of those issues, yeah.
But you know, there's been a lot of rumor going around, and it would help some insights, you know, for the people out there. That has he been abandoned? Does he feel abandoned?
I am not sure. I mean, obviously, when you are held inside prison for so long, you expect a lot more than probably what is happening. But I'm not quite sure about the dynamics in Triple C, honestly, Dhara. My limitation is that I am not sure of the dynamics. How is Triple C composed? What is it that they are supposed to be doing, and so on. But I think I would speak maybe more on all Zimbabweans, all of us as Zimbabweans, to say, what have we done when others are incarcerated, when we see injustice, when we see the country deteriorating like what is happening to Zimbabwe? What have we done as Zimbabweans? And this is what I actually occupy myself with all the time, to say, I mean, we're just taking children back to school, and you look at how the state of our roads are, you look at how parents are struggling to raise school fees, and you look at the state of our schools. Then I say, what is it that we have done? Have we done enough? And I feel overall as a nation, we've not done enough to respond to what is happening. And that, I actually put that blame on all of us, including myself. I still feel that I have done far less than what I could have done to make this country become a better nation.
And still risk being arrested again?
If it means I'm arrested every day for the next 20 years, that is going to be my legacy, and I'm prepared for that.
Hasn't prison taught you anything? To sit in your corner and listen to those in power?
It has actually, in fact, taught me that I need to do more than I'm doing. The resilience I came back from prison with is double than that which I went with. The prison conditions were so hard. They are so terrible and hard. But what they've done to me is it has made me far stronger and resolved that we need to do something to change the situation we have in this country. And that is, I mean, I've said to my colleagues, friends, I was saying to them, you know, I wouldn't want ever to go down the grave before we address the issues in this country, the governance issues, the prison conditions more so. I mean, I'm going to actively campaign for a nation that respects citizens' rights. You know, prisoners are still citizens, you know, and even how do we become a nation that can keep a man like Job Sikala in remand for, I mean, nearly 2 years, 1.5 years? I mean, how do we become a nation like that? How did we get here as a nation? I mean, those are issues now that I'm even more prepared to commit more, to do more, so that we fight.
But Jacob, President, you've got a wife who for 8 months was sleeping in bed alone, looking at the ceiling and hoping and praying that her husband gets back home. You've got children that you're taking to school who were without a father for 8 months. And you're saying that doesn't matter?
It matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It matters a lot. They need me. My children need me. My wife needs me. And also my teams. There are many people that so much need me and love me, and they would want to be with me. But there's also always a price that we have to pay for our freedom and for what we believe, for our convictions. I had a very difficult conversation with my children before I was locked up, because I had to tell them that, you know, the reality is that I may go to prison, because now this is what these people are saying and indicating. And I even told them that, you know, I might not come back in one piece and in one shape from that prison. And I told them, you have to expect anything. I signed up to that. It is my conviction that somebody needs to do something. But now, this speaking out against corruption, speaking out against bad governance, and all the issues that we raise every day should not lead a man to prison in the 21st century. But unfortunately, in a pariah state like we have, in an oligarch and a state, a criminal state that does not respect people's rights, unfortunately, it ends up it ends us up in prison, which is very unfortunate. But the cause that we stand for is just, and somebody has to do that. If it is not me, if it is not Job Sikala, if it is not Nelson Chamisa, it has to be somebody. So even if I were to be with my children and my wife, but somebody has not to be with them so that this country becomes a better country.
You put the blame squarely on everyone in Zimbabwe for the mess that you allege we are in. But some believe that it is the role of those who lead the opposition to deliver us. What is your comment on that?
Man, like I said, I sometimes feel that we can do more and we could have done more, and we still need to strive and work hard to do more. But the overall blame on a country that has deteriorated beside the huge blessing and endowment that we have as a country, that responsibility is squarely on the ZANU-PF regime. They have refused to reform. They have refused to govern in a democratic manner.
But President, power is not handed over, and I mean, political parties by their very nature, they want to consolidate power around them. So how would you blame ZANU-PF for not wanting to reform when they're benefiting?
So that is precisely the problem, that it's about them benefiting, not about the nation. So their focus is on a strong political party that consolidates and holds on to power forever, at the expense of a captured judiciary, at the expense of a captured legislature, at the expense of anything, and turning a blind eye and being obsessed with power only, like what ZANU-PF does. That's the tragedy of the 21st century for our country.
But they're developing their country, aren't they?
What are they doing?
President Emerson Mnangagwa talks about a $12 billion economy that is coming from the mines. You look at the Plumtree Harare road has been fixed. You look at the works that are going on Mashingo Road. I mean, is that not a government that cares about its people?
You see, and I'm glad probably when you were coming here, you were driving. I mean, I saw you come through, you were driving, and I'm pretty sure if we were to ask you how many potholes did you meet on your way from home to here, I'm sure they're innumerable. You wouldn't even count them. I mean,
I think if you ask me how many tired did I meet those potholes?
I mean, look at that. I mean, so I mean, you see, there's sugarcoating development by what dictators do. I mean, for the past, I don't know, donkey years that he has been in power since the coup of 2017. He came to power through a coup. And then since 2017 to 2023, he has done that single road from Harare, which was actually started when the other dispensation was still around. And that's all he talks about. And the bridge that he opened in Karanda, and so on. I mean, that is not proper development for a country whose potential is seriously depleted by corruption. I mean, if you look at, you see, a healthy nation is key to development. You look at our hospital system as our health delivery system in this country, it's in shambles and pathetic. But you see, to show that there's no serious commitment to development, I mean, how much money do we need to make sure that Salim Mugabe Hospital, formerly Harare Hospital, is in shape? I was there the other day. People are sleeping on the floor. Patients are on the floor. I was in B3. Patients are on the floor. I mean, that's unbelievable. So they've not focused and prioritized on the things that matter for the country. They just do development to just sugarcoat one or two projects that they do anyway, out of the millions of dollars that they have access to, and then they steal those through corruption. So there's nobody who can ever convince anyone who stays here in Zimbabwe that there's development under the Emerson Mnangagwa regime. No, you can't convince me, because you and I know exactly what the situation is like on the ground.
Let us turn to Job Sikala for a moment. How is he holding up?
I know the brother is strong, resilient. I mean, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy. What he has gone through hasn't been easy. But you know, when you're in prison, just like when I was there, knowing that you have committed no crime, you want to do things that keep you going. You want to focus on things that keep you going. And he's doing that pretty well. He reads. I mean, we shared books, we exchanged books. I mean, we discussed. You know, we planned, we did a lot of things, and that keeps him going. That has kept him going a lot, and also the support that he's getting from his family, colleagues, and friends. I mean, is amazing.
You're planning a coup.
And you never share how you're planning a coup. Remember.
But we have heard reports about his health. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, he struggled. I mean, prison is not a nice place. Personally, also, when I left prison for the first time, I had problems with my legs. You know, I had to go to the doctor because, you know, every other thing was not in shape anymore. So long incarcerations in our prison, under the conditions that we live, obviously it would affect your health.
What are the conditions?
I mean, just it's gullible. I mean, number one, you are limited, you are restricted to a very small room. So in prison, you know, you are locked up 17 hours a day from 3 p.m. to 8 a.m. And in those 17 hours a day, you are in a very small space, probably 2 meters by 1 meter, the three of you. If you are in a small cell that holds 3 people, if you are in the other cells, a small room would hold 80 of you. And because of that restriction, your body obviously suffers because there's no place to stretch. And the space that you sleep on is like this. You know, you sleep on 40 centimeters. I mean, if you are lucky, it's 60 centimeters. So, and for you to sleep on that space for so long, it's really bad. And of course, you know, there's no running water half the time at prison. So you are at that place without water, no functional toilets. And for the 17 hours you are locked up, you don't have a toilet. So you actually learn to live without a toilet for so many hours in your life. So these conditions, they are so dehumanizing that, you know, even to comprehend them mentally, it's very difficult. And so they then wear you down in terms of your body, in terms of your spirit, and in terms of your expectations. So yeah, you live under those every day, and it's horrible.
Mm-hmm. And the first time you walked out after 8 months and you slept on your bed for the first time, how did it feel?
It was nice. It was unbelievable, actually. You know, I had not seen such space, huge space of, I mean, I got quite a king-size bed, a big one, you know. And it was amazing, actually, to realize that I've kept such a... Actually felt the bed was too big for the first time since we actually bought it. It was amazing. I mean, it was unbelievable that everything looked so big. I mean, I went to sit in my dining room with my family, and I thought, wow, this space is too big. Because everything now suddenly became so big because I was used to small, tiny, squeezed space. And so, but it was very refreshing. And
any nightmares?
Not really, but I am haunted by, you see, the pain of seeing poor Zimbabweans neglected. You know, I tell you, in the cells, one thing that affected me so much is that let's say for a week of 7 days, you would have your cellmates with running tummies for, say, 3 days. Why? Because sometimes they eat cabbage that would have been, you know, they use these chemicals to kill stuff on the cabbages and so on. And then before the expire of the appointed time, and then they just harvest it, and then they are preparing it for prisoners. So they don't really wait for the 14 days after applying chemicals on the commodities. And so half the time, people are with running tummies. And the images have lived with me. The images of dirty space, you know, people actually sometimes, when half the cell is with running tummies, then they just are using a corner of the cell just to relieve themselves, and then you clean in the morning. And those are horrible pictures that have stayed with me. And also the poverty that I saw. You know, one of the things that happened is that throughout my stay at prison for the 8 months, we only had relish or meals with cooking oil for 1 week. for the rest, So it's like they just boil cabbage, put a little salt, and then they serve out. Nothing, no tomatoes, no nothing. So that is the diet. And then as a result, I met prisoners who suffered from a disease called pellagra, which is a result of deficiency of fat and protein in the body. And then the body, in trying to build and create fat, it eats the skin. So whole chunks of skin was peeling off. And then I think I took 5 of them. At one time, some officers, quite some senior officers, actually asked me to bring in soya beans, cooking oil, and a couple of other things. They wanted to feed their about 21 people. And then I said, okay, fine, Mrs. Ngarivhume can buy that, but you would then have to accept those things and bring them in. Then they said, no, we can't. If we are found to be bringing stuff that you buy, then we're in trouble. So we can't do that. You have to find a way to bring them in. I said, what ways can I find? So when they could not bring them in, they wanted me actually to use other means, which I refused. Then I couldn't help them. Then what I then did is I took about 5 or 7 of them, put them on my daily diary, that diet that I was getting. Mrs. Ngarivhume would bring me food every day. So I took 5 to 7 of them. The worst, the other guy, his whole skin had fallen off. You could see his bones. His face was completely disintegrated. And then we started feeding them. So they shared my food. And then in about a week or 10 days, they started improving. And then soon they were okay. And then the trouble then, of course, would come when we had to take them off the budget and bring other people in. Remember, that was a personal budget which I had to share with others. And they would cry. And so those images actually have stayed with me, and I think I would take time to recover from that, because I saw poverty and lack of concern on people. People have a running tummy throughout the night, and then the following morning, it's normal. Everything is normal. There's no effort to get water, there's no effort to improve the diet. There's nothing. They just don't care. Life is normal. And I think those horrible images, I sometimes think about that. Even like yesterday, I was thinking about my colleagues I left at prison. I was with them, twakas, guys, and so on. And then I was just thinking, how are those guys doing? And it's terrible.
Are you saying here that prison is a hellhole? Zimbabwean prison is a hellhole. But you look amazing.
Yeah, it's hell on earth. It's terrible. It's terrible. I'm thankful to God for the fact that I came out of prison quite healthy and well. But not many prisoners are in my position. I could afford to receive meals every day, and I had a lot of support systems. Honestly, Zimbabweans were supporting towards some fellow countrymen were supporting my upkeep, and so on. I got limited visitors every day, because I could get 10, 15, 20 in the first days, and then they actually reached a consensus with me to say, we'll allow only 6 a day. So then I would have 5, 6 visitors every day. But then I was not a typical prisoner in that context. A typical prisoner has had no visitor for 5, 6 years that they're in prison. And so they just survive on what is provided by the prison. They have no visitor. They are vulnerable. And so I would not be a typical prisoner that you would find at Harare Central Prison or at Chikurubi Maximum Prison. I had many privileges. Because of, I'm a political leader. I had a lot of solidarity, friends, lawyers. I got legal visits. Lawyers were coming to see me, walking me through cases, and I got a lot of encouragement. I got books to read, to focus on, and so on. But the ordinary prisoner doesn't have that access. So the ordinary prisoner, I'm sure he comes out a lot thinner than I am. I lost actually 9 kgs when I left prison. So I checked my weight when I entered, and then when I left, I lost only 9 kgs, and I was quite fortunate. But of course, I was quite glowing because God was with me.
Amazing. Now back to the space, the political space that you, as a political leader, 8 months down the line, do you see any changes?
I came out to see a different country. In fact, I would have wished to see a different country which has improved from the time that I went to prison. But things had worsened. I mean, the arrogance by those in power has worsened, and the oppression is tightening, and I mean, the potholes now, and everything has deteriorated. I mean, you can't even drive around because you need to know where this hole is by experience before you can drive. Otherwise, if you're just driving and you haven't been there before, you find yourself in a ditch. I mean, it's amazing. So things have gone worse. The election, remember, was held when I was in prison. And I actually realized that the dictatorship has digged in and has gotten worse.
But from the news that was filtering in and what you now know, what do you think about the performance of the opposition during this just ended election?
It was not good enough. It was not good enough. I mean, yes, there was an improvement in that the last parliament, ZANU-PF had 2/3 majority. But this time, the opposition fairly managed to stop that, which is basically Triple C. And credit to them, really. They managed to stop the 2/3 majority. But now that has been overturned virtually. It's now almost on the verge of being overturned, if it has not been overturned. So for the opposition to take power, I mean, we need to do more than just preventing a 2/3 majority by ZANU-PF. So, yeah, whilst it was hard work, well commendable, but it was far short of what we need to take power. Because it's not about getting a certain percentage in parliament. It's about taking over and taking power. So we still need to do more.
Is it possible in this country?
It is. But the reason why I took time to say it is, there are conditions that we need to do right. There are certain things that we need to do differently. You know, I am a political leader. I'm in the opposition. And I have been fighting for justice in this country for a long time. Really, I grew up, I mean, all my adult life so far to where I am today, I've been, consumed with fighting for justice and democracy in this country. And I've also seen the violations. I've seen comrades, friends, and colleagues who lost their lives fighting for justice in this country. I mean, I was close friends and colleagues with the Tondera Indiras, the Beta Chokururamas, and so on. I mean, they died while fighting for democracy and justice in this country. So, but where we are today, I actually realized that we need to change our strategy and we need to do more if we are to confront this beast. I at times feel, some people have called me radical, which I am far from, actually, in my own opinion. But I feel we have been even lenient, or the way we have dealt with a regime that holds on to power, whose main agenda is to hold on to power, our response has been far short of what is needed. I honestly think so. If that doesn't change...
They have guns, they have the judicial, they have jails, according to what you have said, yes. Right? How do you beat that?
We have numbers. We have... you see, numbers alone. Our safety should be in numbers. And also, we have right on our side. The fact that we are the right side of this whole matrix and what is happening. We are not the convicts. We are the other side of the convicts.
But you say you have numbers. You were alone in prison.
Of course, I was alone in prison, but I told you also that, many of my colleagues, friends, and so on, they were coming to prison. They were supporting me. But of course, they would isolate and take a few of us and put us in prison. They also have killed my colleagues and friends that I've told you about. And I was even told, I even realized actually when I left prison that in Mavuku for the by-election, they killed one of the guys there. So they can isolate a few and kill them. But that is the price of freedom sometimes. There's nothing you can do. You are not killing yourself. Somebody's doing that. So you just got to know that sometimes you are isolated and you are sent to prison. The struggle should continue. In as much as Ngarivhume and Sikala are in prison, that should actually invigorate those who are not in prison to do more. But what overall I think as the opposition is, we need to build a strategy that we can adhere to. a strategy that is so solid, and a strategy that is well discussed and waterproof, so that once it is implemented, is decisive and final. I mean,
do you think it's possible with the manner in which most of those in the opposition have at the end of the day, maybe some say they have sold out, some say they have followed their stomachs, some say that they have realized that the opposition is directionless and they have rejoined ZANU-PF. Do you think it's possible to have a common agenda within the opposition that can allow you to have a strategy and that can allow you to have the results that you desire?
It is, and that is actually my focus, Dhara. That is our focus. And when I was in prison, I saw, I mean, one of the things actually, in retrospect, as I was spending hours of reflection in prison, I realized that in as much as ZANU-PF is an evil regime, but they are well coordinated, and their support systems and their support structures are solid. You know, they've captured the judiciary. The judiciary is ready to, you know, they've been holding my passport for the past donkey years. I only got it just now. I mean, it's well coordinated. You go to the judiciary, you go everywhere. And actually realize that we need that kind of super coordination as well in the opposition. In the opposition.
Is it coordination or it's fear and hunger? Because I like for instance, you just gave me an example right now that the top guys in who are running the Zimbabwe prison services came to you and asked you to bring in cooking oil and stuff. They wanted it. They couldn't receive it, but they wanted it. And they were asking you to smuggle it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So is it coordination or is it's fear of losing jobs and fear of losing benefits?
But on the part of ZANU-PF, you see, they've successfully threatened them. They've successfully whipped them into line. So what I'm saying is ZANU-PF is well coordinated in terms of intimidating citizens, and in terms of, even during the elections, look at what they did. I mean, they chose, you know, I was so actually, the only other time that I was really angry is when I realized that they could not deliver ballots to Glenview. They had challenges in delivering ballot papers to Glenview, whilst they could deliver some to Binga and so on. And then people in Glenora, Glenview, they would go up until midnight, 10 p.m. without receiving ballots. I mean, it made me so angry. But look, it's part of their rigging strategy. Everything is well coordinated and so on. And that kind of determination, we need it in the opposition. We need, until such a time when leaders who are selfless, who don't just think that if I am successful, I go to parliament, get a couple of benefits. We need to live beyond that. And I think there's also a generation of Zimbabweans. Because if we can do it, if the Ngarivhumes, the scholars and others, if we can do it in our generation, honestly and obviously, I believe someone else will have to do it. And I think there is another generation that has to come up, which is selfless, which knows that it's not about me being leader of the opposition or anything. It's about us doing something collectively that can push the country forward. We have to be selfless.
Are you saying we are a selfish generation, President?
Sometimes I think we are selfish. We think so much about ourselves and self, and what is my stake in it? What is it that I have in it at the end of the day? And for Malaba to sit down and accept the housing allowances that they get, the bribes they get from the executive, you know, it's all about himself. I mean, but he's one guy you would expect them to do things the right way. He was arrested and detained during the liberation struggle, but all that has gone through the window. Now the man is thinking about his stomach and nothing else. And that's what you see in the country.
Don't you think that is one of the major errors that we have in this country, that people who believe were there in the beginning to start struggles, whether it's the liberation struggle, whether it's starting the opposition, they feel that they have an entitlement to continue occupying those spaces because they're the ones who started with things.
That's tragic. It's a tragedy that we have and we bear in this country, whereby each and every one of us is thinking about their space and their stake in that space. And people have been disappointed. I mean, if you think of ZANU-PF, I mean, I was in prison, you know, the stories that, you know, those who would remember them, those who have hosted the Mugabes, You know, ED was in the condemned section of Harare Central Prison. And you would expect him to do better and behave better. But you know, he is actually worse than the people who imprisoned him at that time. And how do you explain that? How do you explain that? That people change so much that they don't care anymore. I mean, even if you think that these guys are looking for money, I mean, he has been in power since 1980 as a minister, and he still wants to do more, he still wants to hold on, and others are even talking of a third term. I mean, you have been in power for more than 43 years, but you still feel it's not enough. I mean, what man of spirit is that?
Jacob Ngarivhume, you, you were acquitted.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel on the day that you were acquitted?
Yeah, I mean, I was glad. I was not thankful to anybody, especially, I mean, except to God. I was not, you know, when somebody captures you, an oppressor captures you and releases you, you're not thankful to the oppressor that you have released me. That I had no illusion at all, that I'm thankful that I've been released by them. No, not at all. But I overally was relieved that the ordeal is finally over.
Mm. Mm-hmm. And what message, I mean, what message did you leave to the others when you were leaving the prison?
Yeah, I mean, when you are in that prison, I told them that, you know, for now, you guys have to be strong. Stay strong. You know, in prison, they say, Majera no perai. You know, so this prison life will come to an end one day. But of course, in the long run, I also promised them that when I go out there, I'll fight more. I'll fight more to make sure that we have got a country that respects people's rights. And that I will continue doing. All my life, I am committed to keep fighting.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Now, are you still in this political space?
Yes, I am.
Are you still leading a political party, and what is the future of that party?
Yes. So, and like I've always said consistently, we believe in Transform Zimbabwe that there is need for us to do more than what we are already doing. And I have, even as an individual and as a political leader for a long time, or a political activist for a bigger part of my life, I've also convinced myself that we need to focus our effort on coordinating each other as a nation. We need to converge the nation. We need the nation's ideas in the opposition and everywhere to converge. But initially, we in the opposition need to converge our ideas, come together and say, this is how we can build a better country. And eventually, we have to build a common vision. A vision, you know, there needs to come a time when we build a vision that even those, our brothers and sisters and colleagues in ZANU-PF would say, yes, this is a good vision for the country. Up until such a time, then we would struggle as a nation. So I now am committed to building an organization that accepts a common vision for the country, that actually believes that we need to consolidate and reintegrate the opposition. Bring everybody together round table and say, let's set our differences aside. Let's find the issues that can unite us. And how can we unite ourselves as an opposition? And then so that we are a more collective and better and more strategic opposition to fight this hegemony.
Some people have dismissed the Triple C or Nelson Chamisa as a solution to Zimbabwe's problem. What are your views?
I don't think it's necessarily about rejecting Nelson Chamisa or be it Jacob Ngarivhume or anybody. This Zimbabwean struggle needs to go beyond individuals. You know, we need to identify what can build us together and keep us together. What is it? What is our political ideology? What is it that can bring us together so that individuals can outlive that ideology and can outlive those objectives? And I think this is also something that has been lacking in us, especially in the opposition, where politics and the opposition is about individuals. It has to be about the nation and what we can do for the nation. It has to be about the collective. It has to be about everybody. And so, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to then get so personalized and, you know, say, I mean, it's easy sometimes to judge, but when you are occupying and running that space, You know, many people have said to me, you should have been smarter so that you are not arrested and so that you are not sent to prison. But how smart can you be other than, I mean, when a magistrate sends you to prison with no evidence on 2 different X accounts. Now it was Twitter then. I only learned when I left prison that is now X, then how smarter do you need to be? So sometimes even it's easier even to criticize, but of course, as a leader, I've also learned to accept criticism. Sometimes we have resisted ideas and criticism, and we need to move away from that. When you are fighting a dictatorship, every idea counts, I tell you, at the end of the day. So yeah, to me, it's not necessarily about saying this has not done that, but it's about to say, what do we need to do so that we become better? Yes, we have made mistakes in the opposition. Yes, Triple C has also made its fair share of mistakes, but it's about how we build ourselves from now going forward.
Let's talk about, you spoke earlier on about Sengezo Shabangu. If you would meet him today, what would you say to him?
I think, to me, it's more about how ED has planned now to capture the legislature again. Remember, we said under the separation of powers is the legislature, the judicial, and the executive. And now ED wants to capture everything. And there you have Sengezo Shabangu, who, to me, what is happening is very unfortunate, honestly. And I think, I was actually reflecting the other day to say, if we were to name 3 people since 1960 who have sold out their souls so that Zimbabwe retrogresses, there are names that you would think of. You would think of the Nyati, those who were responsible for selling out at Nyadzonya and Chimoyo, resulting in thousands of innocent people being killed in those Zanla war bases. They sold out. Zipra bases in Zambia were sold out by people, and then hundreds of innocent Zimbabweans lost their lives. So you think of the Nyatis. And if you try to think people who have sold out in this country, I mean, you can't resist the temptation to think, so maybe people like Chabangu, right? I'm just hope I'm pronouncing it well. Yeah. You think maybe Chabangu is amongst those. Is he really getting into the league of the top sellouts in this country? People who have not cared or about anything except, they're prepared to sell their souls to the devil so that they achieve what they want. I mean, you just think about it. I mean, you can have disagreements in the government, but in the opposition, that is. But to allow yourself to be used to the level where when people are just coming out of an election, they've elected their leaders, and then you are used to recall them and you change your narrative. I mean, it's new. It hasn't happened anywhere in the world. I'm pretty sure. I was just trying to check my history and my facts. It hasn't happened anywhere. And for you to be in that position, in that space, whereby you are used to that level, I mean, you wonder how you get home and how you sit, where your conscience leaves you. But I mean, it's very unfortunate what is happening.
He's argued that he has nothing to do with ZANU-PF. In fact, he's correcting the opposition so that it can actually effectively take on ZANU-PF.
I mean, that's unfortunate. I mean, for him to even say that, it's quite shameless. I mean, it's quite shameless. There's nothing he's correcting. He's handing over seats to ZANU-PF so that they have the 2/3 majority which they need, and to be used as a conduit for that. And we know what they do. They use you. You are basically a condom. They use you. They wrap you up, throw you away in there. I mean, they don't even care about you soon. Once their objectives are met, they never look at who you are. And to have our brother, I mean, as in, not brother as in anything, but just as a fellow citizen, a brother in the nation, to take up that role, to say, okay, fine, you can use me. I'm going to be your package to use, to work for you in this manner. I mean, it's something, even if $1 billion is offered, there are things that you can't do for money.
You said that they use people and throw them away. Do you have any quick examples of those that have been used?
This guy, the Rambai Makashinga guy, what was his name? The Rambai Makashinga, Tambaoga, you remember? I mean, he said it, that, you know, and they've used quite a number of people for those purposes, and colleagues who have worked within the opposition also, you know, they've been used for those things, and at the end of the day, you are thrown away completely. Absolutely, they look away at you, and they don't even give a damn. They don't even look at your family, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, as we wrap up, President Ngarivhume, what do you promise the people of Zimbabwe and those who have been in solidarity with you during this times of crisis, going forward? You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's game on. I want to say to you, Zimbabwe, this is game on. And we have to keep fighting. And my commitment will remain unwavering, you know, and unshakable. I remain committed to the struggle to set Zimbabwe free. And I also want to say to Zimbabweans that it doesn't have just to be talk. We just don't have to be tweeting. We just don't have to be coming to this space to project the message. Yes, it is important, but we also need to be on the ground to fight and say, we can't have this. I mean, we have to resist. If corruption continues, we still eventually have to hold the government accountable, because that's our constitutional right and constitutional mandate as citizens. So I want to just say to the people of Zimbabwe, please, let's fight on. You know, this imprisonment has never shaken anything off us. If anything, we are re-strengthened and we are made even stronger to make sure that we confront the situation that we have in this country. And eventually Zimbabwe must be freed. Eventually Zimbabwe must become a better country. It is our heritage. I keep repeating it, that we have no other heritage except Zimbabwe. You know, just as I was coming yesterday, I got a call from somebody in the UK. This other great friend of ours, you know, she's doing care work, and you know, she was saying, I'm depressed. Yes. She was saying, please pray for me. I'm depressed. The conditions under which we work, you know, I mean, I've been taking care of, you know, countless number of people, dressing them up, bathing them. I mean, I'm not used to that. You know, you're called, you go and wash this client, you know, and so on. I mean, and she was saying to me, you know, I'm not used to that. It's quite horrible. But I am in this situation because our country is uninhabitable. And to me, that says a lot. Most of the people you find in the diaspora, they're not even there on their own will. And they're depressed. This other person was telling me that I'm depressed. I sometimes even think of killing myself. You know, so Zimbabweans need their heritage. They need their home. And this is our home and this is our heritage. And unfortunately, some people feel they have more rights and ownership to our heritage. And that is not correct. Zimbabwe is owned by us collectively. So we have our own right. For me to demand for an end to corruption in this country, and one of the things that really actually infuriated me was the fact that the magistrate in one of his, she was saying to me, because you have agreed that you called for anti-corruption demonstrations, and because you went to ZAC, you know, she researched and says, I went to ZAC, as if it was a crime to go to ZAC. A whole magistrate accuses me to say, you went to ZAC and demanded accountability about the 2021, 2020, 2019, 2020 Auditor General's report. So you are that she was equating that to inciting violence. She says, if you can have the guts to go to ZAC. But those institutions are Zimbabwean institutions that must be accessible to us. They are accountable to us. And then to her, it was a point to nail me, to say, why did you go to ZAC? That is crazy. So we've built a country which now believes we have no rights, and that is unacceptable. So what I'm saying is, Zimbabwe, let's come together. This is our country. This is our heritage, despite the narrative they are trying to create. And there's no place better than home. I've traveled. And every time I travel, I really miss home. And I need to be here. So we want to fix Zimbabwe so that we stay here. Here that we were born, here we grew up, and here we are fighting until here we would die in our country. That is our beloved country.
Amazing. Now, thank you very much, President of Transform Zimbabwe, Jacob Ngarivhume, for joining me here on the situation right now. We were talking and ventilating on the issues around your arrest, the political space in Zimbabwe, and also your stay in prison. Just upon your release from prison, Amnesty International released a statement, and its International Deputy Director for Southern Africa, Kanyo Farisi, said, while his conviction has been quashed, it is unconscionable that Jacob Ngarivhume spent 8 months in prison simply for organizing a peaceful protest. He should never have been tried, let alone convicted in the first place. Now, this is the situation right now on Heart and Soul TV and radio. This will always be the situation right now, where we answer the questions that matter, the so what. In the history of politics in Zimbabwe, a lot of political leaders have been arrested. They have been victimized. Even as Zimbabwe was coming into independence, a number of people were arrested, the likes of Lookout Masuku, even Joshua Nkomo himself, who later became Father Zimbabwe, had his own fair share of persecution at that particular time. And at that particular time, the then government justified its actions. Political leaders like Tendai Biti, Lynette Kairenyi Kore, Ostalos Siziba have all also been arrested under numerous charges, which include and are not limited to inciting political violence. Jacob Ngarivhume, sitting here with me in studio, spent 8 good months in prison after being convicted of a crime that he later was to be said he did not commit. Some actually spent 10 years in prison after being convicted for a murder that they did not commit. In fact, one of the accused had serious evidence that when the murder happened, he was actually in church. And there were videos, evidence to prove that. Nonetheless, he was convicted. He lost 10 years of his life for politics. 10 years for differing political opinion. Lost in prison just for the sake of attaining political power. Zimbabweans, we need to do better. We need to treat each other with respect, even if we differ in opinions. This is our country. This is HSTV, a platform where everyone will be heard, where all views are important, where we encourage all of us to build a nation together. I'm your host as usual, Dhara B, and I was having conversation with the Transform Zimbabwe President Jacob Ngarivhume. Thank you very much.
Welcome, my brother.
And
appreciate it.
Wishing you the best after surviving 8 horrible months in
Sure,
prison.
of course.
Zimbabwe, follow us, like us, and promote the work that we do. Until next time, join us again.